I remember the day we first drove through the gates of Oak Ridge Estates. My 10-year-old son, Ethan, pressed his face against the window, eyes wide with wonder at the perfect rows of luxury homes with their manicured lawns and gleaming mailboxes. Everything looked like it had been plucked from a magazine spread. After years of apartment living in rougher areas, this neighborhood represented everything I had fought for, quite literally. "Is this really going to be our home, Dad?" Ethan asked, his voice small with disbelief. I nodded, feeling a swell of pride that my fighting career had finally provided enough savings for a down payment on a modest house in this prestigious school district. "This is it, buddy. New beginnings for both of us," I replied. I did not tell him how I had stretched every dollar from my MMA retirement fund, or how the mortgage would keep me working double shifts at the gym for years to come. The sacrifice was worth it to see the smile spread across his face. Our first week in the neighborhood seemed promising. Neighbors stopped by with welcome baskets and practiced smiles. They commented on how nice it was to see new faces in the community, though I noticed how their eyes lingered on my cauliflower ear and the tattoos peeking from beneath my shirt sleeves. I caught whispers about being different from the typical Oak Ridge resident, but I ignored them. I was used to being judged on appearance. Ethan and I spent that first weekend settling in. I assembled furniture while he arranged his books and science trophies in his new room. "Dad, do you think I will make friends at the new school?" he asked, the worry evident in his voice. Ethan had always been introverted, more comfortable with books than with other children. "Of course you will, and these will be the good kind of friends. Kids whose parents care about education," I assured him. That was the whole point of this move, giving my brilliant but shy son the opportunities and connections I never had. The first sign of trouble arrived exactly 14 days after we moved in. A crisp white envelope slipped under our door, contained an official notice from the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. Our grass exceeded the permitted height by half an inch. The violation included a $50 fine and a warning about maintaining neighborhood standards. I stood on my front lawn that evening, measuring tape in hand, verifying the absurd claim when I noticed him, a tall, silver-haired man watching me from across the street. He stood on the porch of the largest house in our cul-de-sac, a colonial masterpiece with professionally landscaped gardens. Something about his calculating gaze made my fighter instincts bristle. The next day, I learned his name when I took Ethan to school orientation. Richard Thornton, HOA president and major donor to Oak Ridge Elementary. I watched him command attention from parents and staff alike, his hand resting possessively on the shoulder of a boy about Ethan's age. Unlike my son, who hung back nervously, this boy, Brady, strutted through the hallways with entitled confidence. "That is Brady Thornton," the assistant principal explained with unnatural enthusiasm. "His father has done so much for our school. The Thornton Science Wing is named after their family. Brady and your Ethan will be in the same class. What a wonderful opportunity for your son." That evening, as autumn leaves spiraled across our driveway, Ethan was unusually quiet during dinner. When I asked about orientation, he simply shrugged and pushed food around his plate. From across the street, I could see Richard Thornton watching our house through parted curtains, making notes on a clipboard. Something told me our violation notice was only the beginning. "Dad, do we have to paint our door green like everyone else's?" Ethan asked suddenly. "Why, do you not like our blue door?" "I do," he said quietly. "But Brady said blue doors are not allowed in Oak Ridge. He said we are breaking the rules." I felt my jaw clench as I looked across at Thornton's house. The perfect neighborhood was already showing its true colors, and they were nothing like the welcoming facade I had bought into. By mid-October, Our mailbox overflowed with HOA violation notices. The blue door, unauthorized wind chimes, a small basketball hoop in the driveway, a Halloween decoration deemed excessive, though it was simply a carved pumpkin that Ethan had worked on for hours. Each citation came with increasing fines that were stretching my already tight budget to the breaking point. "Dad, do I have to go to school today?" Ethan asked one morning, his voice muffled by his blanket as he remained curled in bed long after his alarm had sounded. This was becoming a pattern: reluctance in the mornings, stomach aches, headaches, any excuse to avoid school. "You cannot miss school again, buddy. Your education is important. That is why we moved here, remember." I sat on the edge of his bed and gently pulled back the covers. "Talk to me. Is something happening at school?" He shook his head quickly, too quickly. "No, I just do not feel good." I watched from the front window as Ethan walked to the bus stop, shoulders hunched, backpack seeming too heavy for his small frame. In the distance, a group of boys huddled at the corner. At their center stood Brady Thornton, taller than the others, gesturing animatedly. When Ethan approached, the group fell silent, then erupted in laughter as my son passed. That evening, I found myself in the garage unleashing months of frustration on my old punching bag. Each violation notice, each worried look from Ethan, each condescending smile from neighbors fueled my combinations. Left jab, right cross, left hook. The rhythmic impact was therapeutic, the only outlet I allowed myself. I had promised when I retired from fighting that violence would stay in my past. Ethan needed stability, not a father who solved problems with his fists. A knock interrupted my workout. I opened the door to find another citation taped to it, this one for excessive noise from my punching bag. Through the window, I caught Thornton retreating across the street, a satisfied smirk on his face. That night I heard muffled crying from Ethan's room. I found him clutching his arm, which showed fresh bruises. "I fell at recess," he claimed, though his eyes would not meet mine. When I reached to examine the injury, he flinched away. My son was afraid, and not just of whatever had caused the bruise. "Ethan, you know you can tell me anything, right?" "I know, Dad." His voice was barely audible, but sometimes telling just makes things worse. The next evening, I attended my first HOA meeting at the community center. The room was filled with neighbors I recognized but barely knew. Richard Thornton presided from a raised table at the front, flanked by board members who seemed more like loyal subjects than community representatives. When the floor opened for resident concerns, I raised my hand. "I would like to discuss the consistency of rule enforcement in our neighborhood," I stated clearly. "My family has received numerous citations, while similar supposed violations go unaddressed elsewhere." The room fell uncomfortably silent. Thornton's smile never reached his eyes as he responded, "New residents often struggle with our standards. Perhaps a community like Oak Ridge is not for everyone." After the meeting, people avoided eye contact as they hurried past me. Only one person, an elderly woman with kind eyes, slowed near my chair. She discreetly slipped a folded note into my hand before continuing toward the exit. In my car, I unfolded her message. "Your son is not the first. Be careful, Thornton has connections everywhere. City council, school board, police." The paper trembled in my hand, not from fear but from a growing rage that I struggled to contain. The following Saturday, the community hosted a fundraiser for the school. I watched from the refreshment table as Thornton held court by the donation display, the school principal laughing too loudly at his jokes, the local police chief clapping him on the back like an old friend. I caught sight of Brady shoving Ethan when he thought no adults were watching, whispering something that made my son's face fall. Not exactly a welcoming community, is it? A voice beside me belonged to a woman filling her punch cup. "I am Elena Martinez. We are the family with the unapproved cultural decorations on Sycamore Lane." "Mike Jackson," I replied. "Blue door and excessive Halloween decorations on Maple Drive." She nodded knowingly. "My husband and I are both doctors, but apparently our Day of the Dead Skull is lowering property values. Meanwhile, the Thorntons can put whatever they want on their lawn. Strange how that works." I watched Thornton survey his domain with proprietary satisfaction. "How long has he run things like this?" "Forever. Most people either fall in line or move out. No one stands up to him." She lowered her voice. "Not after what happened to the Thomas family last year. Their son had issues with Brady too. They were gone within a month, some fabricated lease violation. Thornton made sure they could not find housing anywhere in the district." As I drove Ethan home that evening, we passed Brady and his friends riding expensive bikes along the sidewalk. When they spotted our car, Brady made a throat-cutting gesture toward Ethan. In the rearview mirror, I saw my son sink lower in his seat, a familiar position of someone trying to become invisible to avoid torment. At home, another violation notice waited, this one threatening legal action for continued noncompliance. My hands shook as I crumpled the paper, fighting the urge to drive straight to Thornton's house and confront him. But as I looked at Ethan's fearful face, I knew that whatever battle was coming, it would require strategy, not just strength. For now, I would have to swallow my pride and play by their rules, at least until I understood the full extent of what we were facing. The January snow fell in thick, silent flakes, blanketing our neighborhood in deceptive tranquility. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by unpaid HOA fines and bills, calculating how many extra training sessions I would need to pick up this month. The doorbell remained silent. No one in Oak Ridge visited our house anymore, not since Thornton had made it clear we were community outcasts. The front door suddenly burst open, letting in a gust of frigid air and the hunched figure of my son. My heart stopped when he raised his face. His left eye was swollen shut, crusted with blood that had frozen in the cold. His jacket was torn at the shoulder, and he clutched his ribs as he breathed in shallow gasps. "Ethan," I rushed to him, fighter's instincts assessing injuries. Possible fractured rib, definite contusion around the orbital socket, cut requiring stitches. I had seen and delivered enough injuries to recognize serious ones. "Who did this to you?" For months, he had hidden behind excuses and silence. But something had broken in him today, along with whatever trust he had in the system that was supposed to protect him. "Brady," he whispered as I gently helped him to the couch. "Brady and his friends caught me after science club. They said," his voice broke, "they said they were teaching me a lesson about knowing my place." I carefully applied ice to his eye, rage building inside me with such intensity that my vision narrowed. "Has this been happening all along? All those bruises? The days you did not want to go to school?" Ethan nodded, tears streaming from his uninjured eye. "Brady said his dad told him it was okay, that people like us, people who do not belong here, need to learn respect or leave. He said no one would believe me anyway because his dad owns the school and half the town." My son's words confirmed what I had suspected but had been unwilling to accept. This was not just childhood bullying. This was systematic harassment endorsed by adults who should have protected all children, not just the privileged ones. The next morning, I requested an emergency meeting with Principal Hoffman. I brought Ethan, his injuries stark evidence that could not be denied. We waited in the office, watching through the window as Brady strutted across the playground, completely unconcerned about any consequences for his actions. Principal Hoffman entered. his expression shifting from professional concern to guarded defensiveness when he saw Ethan's face. "What happened to your eye, son?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Brady Thornton and his friends beat me up after science club," Ethan replied, his voice stronger than I expected. Hoffman's eyes flicked to the framed photo on his desk, himself and Richard Thornton at their annual charity golf tournament. The newly constructed Thornton Science Wing, visible through his window, explained volumes about where the principal's loyalties lay. "Boys will be boys, Mr. Jackson. Without witnesses, it is difficult to determine what really happened. Perhaps Ethan misunderstood a rough game." He steepled his fingers, not even attempting to hide his dismissal of the evidence sitting before him. "Misunderstood," I pointed to my son's face. "This was not a playground accident. This was assault, encouraged by an adult who should be reported to Child Protective Services." Hoffman's expression hardened. "Those are serious accusations against a respected community leader. I would be careful about making unsubstantiated claims, especially someone with your background." "My background?" "Your fighting career is hardly a secret, Mr. Jackson. Violence tends to normalize itself in certain households. Perhaps Ethan is struggling to adapt to our peaceful community because of environmental factors at home." The implication hung in the air between us. Not only was he refusing to protect my son, but he was also suggesting I might be the cause of Ethan's injuries. The calculated nature of the response told me everything. This was a prepared position, likely coordinated with Thornton himself. As we left the office, defeated but not surprised, a secretary slipped me a torn piece of paper. On it was an email address, nothing more. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I sent a message to the mysterious address, explaining our situation in desperate terms. Within an hour, I received a response with an encrypted file attachment containing HOA financial statements, board meeting minutes, and a long list of problem residents who had been systematically harassed out of the neighborhood. The documents revealed a pattern of selective enforcement targeting families who did not fit Thornton's vision for Oak Ridge. More disturbing were the financial discrepancies. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in HOA fees redirected to shell companies that all traced back to various Thornton family interests. The next day, armed with this information, I approached Thornton at the community park. He was watching a workers' crew installing a statue, another vanity project that now made sense given the financial documents I had seen. "We need to talk about our sons," I said, keeping my voice level despite the fury burning inside me. Thornton barely glanced at me. "Nothing to discuss. Children have disagreements. Life lessons for your boy about hierarchies. My son has a broken rib and needed 6 stitches by his eye. Perhaps you should teach him to defend himself." His smile was venomous. "Oh wait, that might be difficult given your violent tendencies. We know all about your fighting days, Jackson, your aggression issues, your suspension from the league for that unfortunate incident." The fact that he had researched my past sent a chill through me. The incident he referenced had been a misunderstanding, cleared by the commission after review, but the initial headlines had been damaging. "I also know about the financial irregularities in the HOA accounts," I countered. "The selective enforcement, the kickbacks from the landscaping company you own through your brother-in-law." That got his full attention. His face hardened. "You have no idea who you are dealing with. One call from me, and everyone will see you for the thug you really are, including the custody judge who approved your move here. How stable would you seem if your violent outbursts became public knowledge again?" My fists clenched at my sides. Every instinct from years in the octagon screamed at me to respond physically to the threat. But I thought of Ethan, of the lesson I wanted to teach him about resolving conflict. Thornton noticed my restraint and smirked. Smart choice. Now if I were you, I would start looking for somewhere more suitable for your kind to live. He turned away, calling over his shoulder as he walked toward his luxury SUV. Your 30-day compliance period begins today. I stood alone in the park, watching him leave, understanding that we had reached the breaking point. Whatever came next would determine not just our place in this neighborhood, but the very values I wanted my son to learn from this conflict. The fighter in me wanted blood. The father in me knew we needed something more strategic than brute force. The next morning, I called the school to report that Ethan would be out with the flu. The secretary sounded skeptical, Thornton's influence already at work, but accepted my excuse. In reality, my son needed time to heal, both physically and emotionally, away from Brady's torment. With Ethan safely at home, I transformed our living room into a war room. Blinds drawn against prying eyes, I spread out HOA bylaws, printouts of the financial documents, and neighborhood maps across every surface. If I could not fight Thornton with fists, I would fight him with facts. "What are we doing, Dad?" Ethan asked, watching me from the couch where he was wrapped in blankets, a physics textbook open beside him. "We are making a plan. This is just like preparing for a championship bout. You study your opponent, identify weaknesses, and develop a strategy." I smiled at him, hopping to project confidence I did not entirely feel. "And we never give up. That is not what Jacksons do." For the next week, I drove methodically through the neighborhood during my lunch breaks, documenting every violation that mirrored our own citations but remained unenforced on properties belonging to Thornton's allies. The pristine white colonial across from us had a basketball hoop identical to the one we had been fined for. 3 doors down, a mailbox stood 2 inches taller than regulation with no consequences. The pattern was unmistakable once you looked for it. My breakthrough came unexpectedly at Oak Ridge Coffee, where I had stopped for caffeine during my surveillance route. A woman approached my table, the same elderly neighbor who had slipped me the warning note. "Margaret Winters," she introduced herself, sitting without invitation. "Former district judge, current thorn in Richard Thornton's side." "Mike Jackson," I replied, surprised by her directness. "I know who you are, we all do, but you are not what Thornton has been telling people." She slid a business card across the table. "Saturday, 2 p.m., this address. Come alone." The address led to a small bookstore on the edge of town. Inside, I found not just Margaret but a dozen other Oak Ridge residents gathered between shelves of used books. I recognized Elena Martinez and her husband from the fundraiser. An older man introduced himself as former HOA treasurer until he questioned Thornton's accounting. A young couple described how they faced foreclosure over Christmas lights that honored her deceased mother. "We call ourselves the Resistance," Margaret explained without a hint of irony. "Dramatic, perhaps, but accurate given what we are up against." For 2 hours, they shared their stories of Thornton's systematic abuse of power, the selective enforcement, the intimidation, the connections that made official complaints disappear. What struck me most was that many had simply surrendered and moved away, unable to fight the financial and emotional toll. "Why did none of you band together before?" I asked. "There is strength in numbers." "Fear," Elena answered simply. "Thornton is methodical. He isolates each target, makes them think they are the only ones being singled out." "But not anymore," Margaret added. "Your situation with Ethan has crossed a line. Bullying children is where we draw the line." The following Monday, I met with Patricia Reynolds, an attorney specializing in HOA disputes. Her office walls displayed newspaper headlines about corruption cases. She had one against seemingly untouchable community associations. Based on these financial records, she said, reviewing the documents I had provided, we have grounds for a civil suit. But Thornton has deep pockets and deeper connections. He will drag this out, make it expensive, possibly countersue based on your fighting background. What do you suggest? She leaned forward. They expect you to fight like a fighter, direct, aggressive, emotional. Instead, we fight like them, with rules, with patience, and with precision. Patricia outlined a multi-pronged approach combining legal pressure, documentation of rule enforcement disparities, and carefully orchestrated exposure of Thornton's financial improprieties. Most importantly, we needed to build a coalition of affected families willing to stand together publicly. That evening, I sat beside Ethan's bed, gently touching the fatting bruise around his eye. He had been quiet since the attack, withdrawing into himself and his books. The light that had always defined his personality seemed dimmed. I am going to fix this, buddy. I promise. I brushed his hair back from his forehead. But I need to know you trust me to handle it the right way. Are you going to fight Mr. Thornton, like in your videos? Ethan's voice was small but curious. I had never hidden my fighting career from him, but I had always emphasized the discipline and control required, not the violence. Not with these, I said, holding up my calloused fists, but with something stronger. In our garage, I passed my old fighting trophies gathering dust on shelves. For a moment, I paused by the punching bag, feeling the familiar urge to unleash my frustration in physical form. Instead, I opened my laptop and began typing a detailed record of everything that had happened since we moved to Oak Ridge. Violence was not the weapon I would use, despite what everyone expected from a fighter. Later that night, I received an email from Patricia with our comprehensive battle plan. It would not be quick, it would not be easy, but it would be just. As I read through her strategy, I felt something I had not experienced since entering the octagon for championship bouts, the calm clarity of absolute focus and determination. Spring arrived with a sense of renewal that matched our carefully orchestrated plan. Ethan's physical injuries had healed, though the wariness in his eyes remained. We sat at the kitchen table, testing the small recording device disguised as a normal button on his backpack strap. "Remember, you are not doing anything wrong," I assured him, adjusting the device. "You are just documenting what happens, like a scientist collecting data." This scientific approach appealed to him, transforming his role from victim to researcher. "Like gathering evidence for an experiment," he nodded, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "Exactly. And what do we do if Brady or his friends approach you?" "Stay in public view, do not engage, record everything." He recited our rehearsed protocol, "and remember that I am not alone anymore." I hugged him tightly, proud of his courage yet furious that a child had to employ such strategies to attend school safely. "I will be right outside at pickup time, every day." As Ethan returned to school, I implemented the next phase of our plan, attending every official meeting related to Oak Ridge governance. I became a fixture at HOA board meetings, school board sessions, and even city council hearings where neighborhood matters arose. I never raised my voice, never showed anger. I simply asked pointed questions about processes, documentation, and equitable enforcement of rules. My consistent presence made Thornton visibly uncomfortable. He was accustomed to opponents who burned out quickly or exploded emotionally, providing him justification for dismissal. My calm persistence offered no such opportunity. At the April HOA meeting, I arrived early, connecting my laptop to the community center projector. When the floor opened for resident concerns, I stood quietly. "I would like to present some neighborhood data for discussion," I began, clicking to display my first slide, a map of Oak Ridge with properties color-coded by violation citations. The pattern was unmistakable. Homes belonging to Thornton's allies showed almost no violations despite documented infractions. Properties owned by minorities, single parents, or residents who had opposed Thornton in the past were disproportionately cited. "This analysis covers the past 12 months," I explained calmly. "I have documented 327 violations issued to 42 properties, while similar or identical conditions at 53 other properties received no citations." Murmurs spread through the audience. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Thornton attempted to cut my presentation short, citing time constraints, but other residents called for me to continue. "I would also like to address financial discrepancies in our HOA budget," I said, advancing to the next slide showing landscaping expenditures routed through a company that shared an address with Thornton's brother-in-law. For the first time, I watched Thornton's composed facade crack. His face flushed as he banged his gavel repeatedly. "This presentation is unauthorized and potentially slanderous." An older board member I had never seen speak up before cleared his throat. "Actually, I would like to see these numbers explained. These landscaping costs seem excessive compared to previous years." As the meeting dissolved into heated debate, Elena Martinez caught my eye from across the room and nodded approvingly. The first seeds of doubt had been planted. The following week, I met with Mrs. Abernathy, the school counselor nearing retirement. After 27 years at Oak Ridge Elementary, she had nothing to lose and everything to gain by finally addressing the bullying culture fostered under Thornton's influence. "I have been waiting for someone like you," she admitted, closing her office door. "Someone who would not back down." From her filing cabinet, she retrieved a thick folder. "I have documented every bullying complaint involving Brady Thornton for the past 4 years. 17 incidents, 7 different victims including your son. Principal Hoffman buried every report." "Why did you not come forward before?" I asked, carefully photographing each page with my phone. Her eyes clouded with shame. Fear, at first, then hopelessness. Each family eventually gave up or moved away. She slid a USB drive across her desk. "I have copies of emails where Hoffman explicitly directs staff to ignore complaints against Brady. There is also security footage from the science wing that captured the attack on your son." "How did you get access to that?" "The security guard's daughter was Brady's first victim 3 years ago. He has been waiting for someone to actually use the evidence." Armed with Mrs. Abernathy's documentation and Ethan's growing collection of recorded bullying incidents, we built a comprehensive case file. Patricia advised patience. We needed irrefutable evidence that would withstand Thornton's inevitable counterattack. That opportunity came unexpectedly at the spring fundraiser. I had volunteered as part of my visibility strategy, manning the ticket table alongside other parents. Thornton had largely avoided direct interaction with me since our confrontation in the park, but I could feel his growing frustration at my persistent presence in community affairs. As I was collecting supplies after the event, Thornton cornered me behind the gymnasium, away from the remaining attendees. His carefully maintained facade had crumbled, revealing the bully beneath the polished exterior. "You just cannot take a hint, can you, Jackson?" he snarled, invading my personal space. This pathetic crusade of yours is going to end badly for you and your son." I remained calm, though every instinct from my fighting days screamed for defensive action. "The only thing ending is your abuse of power in this community. You have no idea who you are dealing with," he hissed, grabbing my collar and shoving me against the wall with surprising strength. "I built Oak Ridge. I decide who belongs here." I did not resist, did not defend myself as my training urged me to do. Instead, I smiled calmly and said, "Thank you for demonstrating exactly who you are, Mr. Thornton." His eyes widened as he realized his mistake, just as the school superintendent rounded the corner and witnessed his aggression. What Thornton failed to notice was Elena's teenage daughter filming the entire interaction from behind a nearby tree, along with 3 other parents who had positioned themselves according to our predetermined plan. "Richard," the superintendent looked shocked. "What on earth are you doing?" Thornton immediately released me, smoothing his expression into practiced concern. Just having a discussion about his son's continued behavior problems. Mr. Jackson became agitated. "That is not what the video shows," Elena said, stepping forward with her phone displaying the clear footage of Thornton's unprovoked assault. For a moment, I saw naked panic in Thornton's eyes as he realized his carefully constructed image had cracked publicly. He quickly recovered, forcing a laugh. "A misunderstanding, clearly. The angle of that video is misleading." But the damage was done. As word of the incident spread through the community, combined with the evidence we had been quietly sharing with key stakeholders, the first serious questions about Thornton's leadership began to emerge in public forums rather than fearful whispers. That night, as I applied ice to the bruise forming where Thornton had grabbed me, Ethan watched with concerned eyes. "Are you okay, Dad?" "Never better," I answered truthfully. "Sometimes, buddy, the strongest move in a fight is not throwing a punch when everyone expects you to. Today, Mr. Thornton knocked himself out without me having to do a thing." For the first time in months, Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. The counterattack had begun, and we were finally landing meaningful blows against a system that had seemed untouchable. Summer heat descended on Oak Ridge, but the temperature inside my kitchen rose even higher as it became the unofficial headquarters of our growing movement. What had begun as a personal battle for my son's safety had evolved into a community-wide awakening. The resistance was no longer operating in shadows. "We have confirmations from 23 families so far," Elena reported, updating our spreadsheet of residents willing to testify about HOA abuses. Her husband Miguel, a pediatrician, had compiled medical records documenting injuries to children bullied by Brady Thornton, with parent permissions carefully secured. Margaret, our retired judge, coached Ethan and 4 other children on giving testimony to the school board. I watched my son standing before our living room mirror, practicing his statement with growing confidence. "My name is Ethan Jackson. I am 10 years old. For 8 months I have been physically and verbally abused by Brady Thornton and his friends." His voice trembled slightly but held firm. "Adults knew and did nothing to help me or the other kids. That was wrong." I felt a complicated mixture of pride at his courage and rage that he needed to display it under such circumstances. The fighter in me wanted to shield him from this battle, but the father in me recognized that his participation was essential to both his healing and the larger cause of justice. Our breakthrough came unexpectedly when the local news van appeared outside the community center during the July HOA meeting. An anonymous source, Margaret had excellent connections from her judicial days, had provided financial documents to the station's investigative team, revealing systematic embezzlement of HOA funds for Thornton's personal projects. The reporter cornered Thornton as he attempted to leave through a side door. "Mr. Thornton, can you explain why 6 figures in HOA landscaping contracts were awarded to a company registered to your brother-in-law's home address?" His usual composure cracked completely. "This is a smear campaign orchestrated by disgruntled residents who cannot follow simple community standards," he snapped, pushing past the camera. That evening, Patricia called with more news. "The school board has scheduled an emergency closed session based on the evidence we submitted. They are taking this seriously now that the media is involved." The emergency school board meeting was standing room only. Families who had previously remained silent now occupied every seat, their presence a testament to the community's changing dynamics. Principal Hoffman sat stiffly beside board members, his usual confidence replaced by nervous glances toward the door where Thornton had yet to appear. When the board chair invited testimony from affected students, Ethan was the first to approach the microphone. Though dwarfed by the podium, his voice carried clearly through the room. "I was excited to move to Oak Ridge because everyone said the school was special," he began. "But on my first day, Brady Thornton told me I did not belong here because my dad was just a fighter, not a doctor or lawyer like the important parents." A murmur ran through the crowd as Ethan methodically described months of escalating abuse, culminating in the brutal attack that had left him hospitalized. As he spoke, the board secretary displayed security footage from the school hallways, damning evidence that Mrs. Abernathy had preserved showing Brady's calculated torment. Child after child approached the microphone, their stories forming an undeniable pattern with Brady Thornton as the common denominator. Most devastating was the testimony of a former student who had transferred to